Hi, and thank you for your interest in the QMS database. I'm using a NCH desktop capture software in order to show you a quick overview of how the QMS database works. It sits on your desktop as an icon for access. You click it and it opens up. It asks you for a password, which is QMS001. And now you're at the front screen for the QMS database. It automatically will switch over to this dashboard, and the dashboard is divided up into 5 sections. The first are those things that are set up typically one time. You put your customer information in generally one time, your risk information. You would do that for the most part one time or visit that annually. Resources are things like employees, job descriptions, who your trainers are, training records, so that doesn't happen quite as often. And then the first one here is a definition of your QMS processes, which is a requirement of both ISO and AS9100. So you would document your processes here. Then there are administrative controls for document control, stamp control, tooling, fixtures, and calibration. And then a segment that I call processes, which are common to every company. For example, orders and shipping. This is your contract review. Next is design, if you have design. And if you do not have design, you simply skip over this section. And then third is purchasing. And here you have your approved supplier list, your quality control plans for receiving, your supplier surveys and evaluations. Then there's quality control functions, for example, inspection, managing non-conforming material and products, and return material authorizations. I'm using a Microsoft Surface Pro, so my screen isn't real large. So I'm going to scroll over and show you the quality assurance processes. And again, this is all based on ISO 9001 and AS9100. And so you see the paragraph of the standard. This is management review, customer feedback, internal audits, and improvement. So for the sake of keeping this video short, I'm going to move through this rather rapidly. But when the database opens, the first thing you're going to want to do is set it up. Put your company name, remove my logo, put your logo in. That'll populate the logo and name throughout the database automatically. There's a NAGME button. There's a set of reminders and data sets that open automatically. If you push the button, it will prompt all of that data to open automatically when you start up the program. If you don't want it to do that every time because it's quite a bit of data, then you unclick this and it doesn't open automatically for you. When you set up, you may want to import data, and you do that through Excel. It's quite easy, and so you can export all of the Excel documents and then re-import them into the database, and it speeds the setup. The reports that I first spoke of are past due reports for training, corrective action, preventive action, calibration. And when you click this button here, you will get those reports. You can manually run them, and then there's an overview of each of the segments that you can look at any time. So you start with the QMS processes, and each of the screens, subject matter screens, start like this with a little bit of instruction, the form, or essentially the input, and then the output of this section. And in this case we have 4 reports. There's a button here to print out a turtle diagram. The flow chart here to the right is simply to give a visual depiction of what this process is about. And there's a help segment that gives you all the information that I think somebody would need in order to fill out this section of the database. Then when you go to the input form itself, then you fill out the form as you go through, and when you mouse over, you'll get information will pop up and help the user fill in this information. In some cases there's drop downs, and so it makes it quite easy to use. Every one of the subject screens, input screens, will have a section for notes, because I don't know everything that a company may desire. And there's also a section for attachments, and you can attach really any sort of Microsoft document or video or PowerPoint or Excel or PDF, anything like that, and any sort of image file can be attached here. When you go on to the next section here, which is resources, because this is human resources, it asks you for a password, which is HR001. And here again, you see the same sort of subject matter layout. However, in this case, there are 5 input forms, and there are 9 reports that are pre-created for you. And then for the job description sections, if you elect to use job descriptions, then there's a form and 3 reports. So here you have the typical sort of information you'd want about an employee and their level of competency. There's a button to create a job description. If you don't have one, this will help you create that form and then populate it into the database so that you can use it as a drop-down. So it would populate here as a drop-down. And of course, you're putting in the employee's name, first name, last name, their department, their position. An employee number is created automatically. And then, in accordance with ISO and AS, you have to define what the requirements are for competency, and that comes in the form of education, skills, training, and experience. So you put that information in. There's some simple drop-downs to follow. And then, importantly, you define what this person can do. And when you check these buttons, then that enables them to use different segments of the database. Once this person terminates employment for whatever reason, then you can put in the termination date, check the box, and that takes them off the list, but you don't lose the records. There's a section for training. You can add an instructor, training programs, if you have standing programs for ESD that you do periodically, or for forklift driving you do every couple of years. You can put those programs in. And then the reports, and these reports I've created. There's over 80 different reports already done, but of course you can go into Access and create any report that you would like. And you can see I have quite a bit of data already here, but nothing is locked, and you're welcome to utilize Access and define your own in any way you'd like. Risk analysis, which is coming up as a very big requirement in the ISO 9001:2015. This has risk analysis for both business, process, and then product. And I call it part risk. But when you get to risk analysis, it's very similar to the FMEA you may already be familiar with. But it allows you to collect the various risks and then report out either by part number or as an overall risk, and then define what your significant risks are. And there's some instruction to go along with this as well. Customer information is a simple drop-down that, or a simple input form that becomes a drop-down in other forms. Document control, as you might expect, there's only one input here for controlling your documents. This feeds back to your process set so that you can define by process who's in that process and what command criteria they have, if any, and all these link together. And then 4 reports for that, and again, there's a setup, a help section, and if you don't have your documents and you're starting from scratch, then there's also templates in place that you can use. And I'll show you the templates here. And these were already sitting in the Access database. So you simply click on it, it opens up, you open it, and you'll have a Word document that's completely unlocked. These are generic, they're not written to be anything to wow somebody. It just gets 80 or 90% of the typing done for you and gets you set in the right direction. Stamp control is for stamps that you may issue to inspectors and associated reports for that. Tooling and fixtures, you have government tooling or customer tooling. It's a place to record that tooling, you keep that inventory. Calibration is just what you might expect. It does everything that a normal calibration software might do, with the exception of gauge R&R. We do not have any means to perform gauge R&R. You'd have to put in measurement and variance data in order to do that. But it does automatically do a recall for you. You can do a report and export it as a PDF or an Excel to another department manager or whatever is appropriate. There's a complete inventory list. You can do a 10-day and a 30-day recall report. When you do calibration, then you put in all of the gauge information that you'd like, and here you can import this through Excel in that first setup screen that I showed you. Standardization means that you are checking the gauge and ensuring its accuracy before you use it. Things like plating thickness gauges, Rockwell hardness gauges, those are not calibrated, they're standardized. And so that's the purpose here. Orders and shipping. This is really contract review. This is the 7.2 requirements of ISO and AS. And essentially, you're going to put in your order, contract, item, customer, any risks, and I help you define those. Maybe you have ITAR or a DoD priority. You can put that information in. Who reviewed it and who approved it, and this is linked to the resources section, so I have no name in this empty database, so there's no one to choose from, but there could be as many of employees as you authorize. The PO number, any special requirements, statutory, regulatory requirements, customer approval. Now there is a segment here, there's a little sub-segment, this customer, approved customer requirements. You could collect all of the requirements of all of your customers. It's tedious, but once you have this done, it becomes very handy as to know what you would accept or exclude in a customer contract. Those become a drop-down, and then you would simply select them. But that means you've got to keep this up current with your customers' requirements. The design section, a lot of the companies that I deal with do not have design, but if you do, you define your design stages, your planning, your inputs and your outputs. You record your reviews, design verification, validation, and any changes. And there is also help information here as well. Purchasing is a little bit more complex because you have suppliers, supplier surveys, supplier information, and receiving inspection. This does not create a purchase order. This does not replace your accounting system. It's simply a means to manage your suppliers. And how do you flow down information to them to meet the requirements of 741? But what is linked with this, not only do you have the input information, you have the reports, so you know how your suppliers are doing, including defect percentage charts. Anywhere where there's numbers, there's a button where you can export all the data to Excel if you're more comfortable with that. You can click a button and send the information by email. You do a survey by email if you would like to do that. When the purchased item comes in, there's a receiving inspection segment, and that's which is what I've just clicked on here. And now you're tying your purchase order to the supplier, what was received, what documentation was received. You would also have a control plan, which is defined, so now your receiving inspection people know what to look for. All your traceability requirements for heat number, lot number, serial number, any particular notes, any special instructions. If the item is perishable, and you have maybe you have a refrigeration requirement, and there's an expiration date, you would put that here. The quantity received, the quantity accepted, rejected, your NCR number, corrective action, whether you accepted or rejected it, who inspected it, and if you'd like to print a label, you click the button and it prints a small size label. That means you need to have a label printer or some sort of printer form attached, but you can export the data and then to a print and then attach that to the item. And there's instructions here about purchasing. And again, I know I'm going through this quickly, but I don't want to create a huge video file. And it's hopefully something that gives you a basic overview of what the QMS database can do. Next is inspection, and it includes the AS9100 forms. First article, in case you're not using AS9102 forms, then you could just do a simple first article. There's a section here for delegation, which is often overlooked by a lot of companies, and then that same receive inspection that I just showed you. If there's a nonconformance, then there is a nonconformance form, and if you like defect codes, there's a means to do that, and there's a means to track rework and loss, which was another client of mine that asked for this, and so it's there. If you don't want to use it, it's perfectly fine, of course. There's 11 reports that are pre-created, and even an export to Excel. Here's the rejection form, and without going through all of this, so we cover all the usual things for whether it's an RMA, whether it's who the originator is, the sample size, how many were good, how many were bad, the defect, any serial numbers, the disposition, and then on to where was the source. You would collect your department, whether it's internal or external, your supplier name, and all of these link to the rest of the database. Your defect code, if you have any containment actions, which is a fairly new requirement with the AS9100 guys. The automotive folks have been using that for a while. You can attach pictures, you can put a cost in, which you can then use that for analysis later, and then list the person who has approved this. If there's a reason to give a notice to your customer, hopefully not, but if you ever had to create a notice, there's a template letter for doing that. If you are sending this NCR to a supplier, then the format is there, and what's different is I've left your customer name off, and that which I thought was sensitive wouldn't show up. Internally, you would have a full form of all of this data. And if there's an RMA, then there is a means to create an RMA and track it, and there are reports that are already created, and this gives you some costing information. For management review, this is a requirement of both ISO and AS. Then there is a management review form which takes you through all the requirements of the 5.6 requirements for ISO and AS. This is simply a record of all of the management review activities that you go through. And you see there's a default that says see attached report that's already here. That's because when you hold your management review session, if you choose to do a meeting, then one thing you can do is click on 9 reports for management review. This button will fire off 9 reports. Your corrective action data, your preventive action data, and each time a report opens, you put in the date range that you'd like to look at. If it's this quarter or this year, it'll prompt you for the date. You put in the date, it runs the report, and it gives you something to look at and use for your management review. These buttons are for tracking those reports. There is another requirement in Section 5 of ISO and AS that says that top management needs to communicate with employees. How do you do that? Normally through a whole series of meetings, production meetings, scheduling meetings, safety meetings, all the things you do. There's no record required. However, how will you show that you've done it when you tell the auditor, hey, of course we do it? Well, there's a little form here, and you can simply log in if you choose to do this, what the agenda is, what the meeting minutes were, and it's just a place to keep information about various meetings that you may have. Not a requirement, it's just a place to put it if you choose to do that. Any one of these sections, if you choose not to use it, it won't mess up another section, with the exception of resources. But any other section, they're not tied together. If you choose not to do design, or you choose not to use a particular segment of the database, it won't be a problem. Customer feedback is in 2 forms. There's one's a survey, and you can email a survey, and the other is an ad hoc kind of feedback. The customer calls and they complain about something. You can put their name in, the feedback details, any action that was taken, the source of the feedback, maybe attach a letter or an email here. Is there corrective action required? Was it positive? I imagine if it wasn't positive, then you'd want to do a corrective action. What does the feedback relate to? Any reference to a job or order number, and who entered it. So now you're being able to utilize this information to get to your 8.2 requirements. And then there's a number of reports, including Excel, because there is some scoring that could be done, scoring 1 to 10 for each of these questions: on-time performance, product quality, service quality, and overall perception. And the reason for that is because that's the requirement of ISO and AS. It says you must monitor and measure the perception of your customer. So here's a way to do that. Internal audits are next, and allows you to schedule an audit based on your processes and define your audit areas, a place to put your audit results, and you can create an audit checklist. The audit checklist allows you to create a checklist by process. You'd add a process, write the questions, and I already have 400 and something questions available, and they're already here, but you can add your own questions. So here's all of the questions already in place. You can print out a question checklist form so that your internal auditor can do their work. And now you've got your audit complete, and you put your audit results in. You select your audit number from the drop down, any corrective action that might have been issued, the date, attach the checklist that's been filled out, and notes, and you're done. And then there's a help here that takes you through the internal audit requirement. This is the 822 requirements. And then last is improvement. An improvement segment here, this is based on section 8 of the both ISO and AS standards, starting with forms for objectives. You define your objectives. Corrective actions, and you see there's an NCR related corrective action, or a customer corrective action, or a supplier corrective action. A 5Y form, corrective action codes if you like to use that, rework and loss if you'd like to use that, and 8D, and this is the 8D section just as a sample. It follows the automotive requirements, guidelines. These are related reports. Preventive action, very similar to corrective action, but this is prior to a nonconformance actually occurring. This is potential eliminating a cause of potential nonconformance. So it's a preventive action. You can send this by email. You can print the form if you prefer. Some people like to print. And then the last is continuous improvement. And here you would state what the problem is and the action plan that you are going to undergo, and what actions you're taking, what measures might be applicable, any document changes, and then the date. And all of these turn up in the management review report. This is just some acronyms and some help for the improvement section. And that is a very brief overview of the QMS database. This blank section here, I should note, this is where your name goes. And when you set it up, put your name in, it will populate up here in the top. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.